We got the head of gaming, Ed Chang, in the house today. Can we bring him into the screen, please? There he is.
Ed.
What's up, guys?
What's happening? Ed,
What's up, my friend?
Nice to have you on the show. I'm the only guy who's not wearing Avalanche drip right now, so I feel kind
of.
We
got to get you set up then.
I know. We gotta get my game up over here. You know what I mean? But Ed, welcome to the show. It's so cool to have you here, man. A fellow gamer. You know what I mean? Always like when we have more gamers on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. It's awesome. So you are the head of gaming at Avalabs, like we said. And, you know, usually when we have someone come on the show, we just like to get a little bit of background for our viewers and listeners. Of course, we post this on YouTube and on Spotify. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a little background on Ed Chang, you know, how you got into crypto, how that got plugged into gaming, head of gaming at Avalabs, and just kind of like what your journey's been like, man.
Yeah, happy to. So before I joined Avalabs, I probably worked in the gaming industry for 10 plus years. I worked at startups in the esports space on the venture side. And then I was actually at EA for about 5 years before I joined here. So I was kind of leading strategy for our esports group, working on games like FIFA, Madden, Apex Legends. And how I got into crypto, you know, I think I've always held crypto as like it was always just kind of a store of value for me, like a diversified asset. But a couple of years ago, really started diving deep into like reading and learning more about, you know, the potential of blockchain. So that took me to like DeFi, NFTs, gaming. And, you know, I was a little bored at work, and that was around when Axie Infinity started really blowing up, right? And say what you will about the game and token price and stuff like that, but just saw the potential again of what blockchain could unlock for a large chunk of the gaming industry. So started looking around, got in touch with the fine folks at Avalabs, and the rest is history. So I joined December of 2021. I lead our gaming team on the biz dev side, and it's been a really fun ride. You know, starting to see a lot of the fruits of the labor that the team has you know, so lovingly the work that we've put in, and it's been great to see. And we're coming off a really fun, you know, GDC Game Developer Conference last week as well.
Yes.
Now, fun fact about Ed Chang here. This guy actually did his research properly. Like before he joined Avalabs, before anybody knew he was going to be around, I think we detected this because we saw it in a Discord. We tried to trace who it is, and it turned out it was a person from EA. I was in one of the gaming Discords. We were extremely excited that somebody from EA actually took notice and joined, and boom, head of GameFi. You know, as you know, Chang appeared. It was awesome to see because it also means you know, people are taking notice, right? Particularly, we expect the smart people to join right away. Right, lots of other folks will follow, and we love to have you in the ecosystem, man. Welcome to the show.
Yes, sir.
And thanks for coming. So I guess I'll start with the most important question of all, right? Or at least most important question of late. Did you beta Diablo 4? Part 1. That's question part 1. Question part 2 is, why aren't the freaking asset system in that game, which is extremely dense, extremely complicated, why aren't these assets on Avalanche, man?
Yeah, the first part of your question is no. Unfortunately, I don't have too much time for games these days. I do have a newborn at home who's 4 months
congratulations.
old. So, thank you. So when I do play games, I try to play more of games in our ecosystem. I do try to watch some esports and stuff still, like on Twitch. But to answer the second part of your question, you know, I think a lot of times I hear folks in the space are like, yo, why doesn't Riot put League of Legends in the blockchain? Well, you kind of got to dive into that, right? Because right now, you know, I think this oftentimes is by design. It's a feature, not a bug, right? So for a lot of these really big publishers, let's say Riot, for example. I don't have any insider info, but let's say League of Legends, you know, makes $3 billion a year, right? It's a free-to-play game, so it's purely on skins where people are buying directly from the publisher, right? So Riot gets to keep 100% of that effectively, right? Because they're buying directly from them. If you do open up secondary markets, what commission do they take? 5, 10%? They take 10% of secondary sales. That means that you got to do 10x the transaction volume, right? And as much as that would be nice, it's hard to say, hey, do a lot more work and follow a lot more rules and build out a lot more tech for less upside necessarily. So I think that's really the reason. But I think you do see sometimes like publishers who really get that vision, and the players will eventually demand it if Web3 gaming becomes a thing, and we might be in a different spot in a year or less from now.
Absolutely. I guess to your point, if you can sell the same skin to then 10 different people at 100% the price, it's much less advantageous for one guy to sell it 10 times to different people, right? Or people
exactly. I mean, then that's not factoring in things like the LTV, right? If you do offer player liquidity for this stuff, like how much longer does a player stay loyal to your ecosystem? If you look at like Counter-Strike, right, there's a whole economy, but it's still kind of somewhat of a closed loop. So there's definitely a lot of let's call it side benefits. But right now, for a lot of these corporations, like top line revenue is probably the name of the game.
Of course. I mean, I ended up having to purchase the game because our producer sent me a bunch of teary-eyed messages saying, I need to be carried in this game. I need a semi-pro player come in and carry me, please. That's why I tried it for a couple hours. I thought it was a good game. And there is definitely synergies as a biased person that I can see. I get an insane amount of loot, very complicated to figure out all the pieces of it. And I would like to be able to share it, or I would like to be able to monetize it. But of course, if it doesn't make sense from a business perspective, and I as a gamer don't push the publisher in that direction en masse, then yeah, it's somewhat difficult to happen. Anyways, if we sort of think about Avalanche, then how are games going on Avalanche? Give us a little bit of an update. You're the one person that sees it all, I assume. So would love to hear your take on this.
And would love to hear more about GDC too, because that looked incredible.
Absolutely. I'll answer your GDC question first, then we can talk a bit more about the system. I think GDC was awesome. I've been to a couple now, but there was just an overall really strong energy around gaming. I think, post-pandemic, people are looking to travel more, getting to see folks in the ecosystem. That was great. I think the other thing that was interesting is we had meetings with a lot of really, top tier Web2 publishers and brands and investors. And it just felt like there's a general, much more curiosity, like a genuine curiosity or an acceptance of blockchain, and that, hey, this could be an interesting technology, right? Versus tell me how this isn't a scam or something like that. I will also say it still feels like Web3 games are pretty early, right? There wasn't a Web3 game at scale today that I saw demoed. It's a lot of future things, but I think we were represented really well. We had a really cool booth there. I'm probably a little biased, but it was probably the best booth that I saw, whether Web2 or Web3, and the team just smashed it. And we got a lot of really good feedback, to the point where I think there were a lot of folks who didn't really know who we were and would come to the booth and they're like, are you a publisher, or are you a studio, or something else? And being able to talk about digital assets and economies in the game and decentralization was really cool. So there's that. And then of course, we've got to feature a lot of our games, like DeFi Kingdoms, Fableborn, Meta Ops, and Paradise Tycoon. The list goes on, and Rainy. People got a really cool chance to be like, wow, there's actual real games being built on this blockchain. So as someone who's worked behind the scenes with my team really hard, I think it's great to see. And then of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I feel again, very biased, but I feel like Shrapnel, right, which is a AAA kind of first-person shooter built on Avalanche on a subnet, really stole the show from a Web3 perspective. They had a demo there that you could play. It was like a 8-person free-for-all, and I went in on Monday to go play. And even for me, who probably gets more updates than the average Joe, I was pretty impressed with how polished and far along it was. And I think I wasn't alone, in the sense that I had heard that on the first day, not everybody had showed up for their assigned time to play the game. But because word of mouth had gotten around, the rest of the days were just filled with people who wanted to check out the game. And so that's always a really good sign, right? And There were other games that showed up. So GDC was great. I think my team is still recovering because they were going morning till night, and they were like the Energizer bunnies. So great.
Yeah, shout out to
job.
Coop, man. Coop was doing it big. Shout out to Coop. I saw him like everywhere.
Coop putting in work. He was like a celebrity there.
Yeah.
And then in general, kind of how are things going, or like what does the ecosystem look like? I think.
But before you join into that, I kind of want to emphasize this, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Is GameFi and effectively you the person that has, like, I don't want to call them deals, but pushed the most number of projects that ultimately got deployed on Avalanche? Because I think it's the biggest vertical. Is that true? So many games launched since early 2022. I imagine a lot more projects have been deployed in this vertical than even DeFi. Is that correct?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I would say maybe like announced projects, because a lot of the games are in different stages of deployment, right? So
sure.
Game dev cycles can take anywhere between 1 to 3 years. So,
right. Yep.
While one game may be announced and we're super hyped about it and we see the progress, like we won't see, it come to market until like this year or next year or later this year. So what I will say is, I think we've got a very strong ecosystem, right? I think the way that I think about things is I like to think of us as like building the Netflix of Web3 games, right? So this like diversified playground. Like on Netflix, you've got documentaries, you've got blockbuster movies, you've got TV shows, Korean dramas, reality kids shows, all that stuff, right? Because we don't have a crystal ball in that we don't know what platform, what genre of game is really going to like take off or get adoption. Hopefully a lot of them. And so what we do is we really try to find the best teams in each vertical and just go really deep with them, right? So you want something on mobile, you want something on browser, on console, like ideally we'll have something there, and then we'll be able to work with the ecosystem to really like cross-pollinate all that kind of stuff. So that's how we think about things. And like I said, I think we're pretty happy with, or we're very happy with the games that we do have on board, and we've got a lot of stuff in the works, right? And I think sometimes it's tough, right? So a lot of times these developers who are building Web3 games come from Web2. So they're game designers at heart. They're not like deep crypto tech people, which is totally fine. But the problem is, like, I think we genuinely believe that we have the best tech, we have the best kind of roadmap, and we have the best everything. But like every chain that they talk to is telling them the same thing, right? Yeah. So sometimes they go really deep and they understand it and they get it right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, and we might have to have a conversation down the road. So, no matter how we engage with whoever, we're always here to help and really see ourselves as like an extension of whichever game team that we're working with.
I mean, the way I kind of view it as before consoles existed, it was all about the PCs, right? I had an Amiga 500 that was upgraded to have 1 megabyte RAM, and there were an incredible amount of like games on it. And then again, I'm old, I get it, don't laugh. And like when the first console came around, I was skeptical.
I'm like, older than you.
Are you really? Okay. I mean, you had the Nintendo Game Boys and whatnot, but like, PC, I felt like I couldn't get the same experience as a PC. And now, of course, consoles are another dominant force, right? I think like the adoption of the blockchain tech is kind of similar, right? The gamers as well as the game devs need to sort of get warm to the idea over time, let the technology prove itself, and then adopt it, build games on it, and people will come, right? Where do you see us in that curve? Is that like the, let's say whatever adoption means in your mind, is that 2 years down the line? Is that 5 years down the line? Or is that even further out? What do you like? How do you view this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer in a different way, right? I think there's like what's going to be successful. I think in the short to medium term, what we're going to see is effectively like free to play type Web3 games that bring in hopefully millions of users, and then they'll be transacting items in game, and they'll be NFTs and on-chain items, maybe with a currency, right? That to me, that's like kind of house money. We need to get there. Well, there isn't a game at scale today that's been around for long enough. There's a lot of potentials that will be coming out like this year, end of the year, next year. I think we'll get there, right? So like we need a game with 1 million users on chain transacting the items. I think that's great. What would be amazing is kind of down the road, which is there's going to be all different, ways of transacting, all different ways of, exploring economies and rewarding creators and players, whole new, hopefully genres of games that will come up. I think we're just really early. So like I've heard of, white papers and ideas of them. Haven't seen any of them in practice yet. But I think similarly, like the analogy, what is it like when the iPhone first came out, no one really knew we were going to have like Snapchat and TikTok and Lyft and Uber. Right. And I think we'll get there.
Awesome, man. Definitely makes sense. This is probably, at least personally, by far the vertical that I'm most excited about because it's new, it's very exciting, and it caters to a community that doesn't have a lot to do with finance, right? Up until like maybe this cycle, it's been all about DeFi and payments and loans and trading and whatever. And now there is finally another real use case, another vertical that I feel very strongly about. And I think not just gaming itself, but I think it is a big step towards the overall adoption of blockchain and crypto as a solution, right? Because finance and fighting banks and inflation and blah, blah, sure, but we've been hearing that for 10 years. And this is a completely fresh new thing that, I personally love. Anyways, so since 2022, though, lots of projects have launched, right? And obviously we had a massively down macro situation, but obviously the ecosystem is still moving forward. What games, if any, that the Avalanche team is tracking? Who is underrated? Who should the audience look at and give it a shot and play? Do you have any suggestions? I obviously know there's many, but is there any that you think is in particular people should pay attention to?
Yeah, I love this question, but I hate this question because inevitably someone gets left out, and it's not
somebody's going to be forgotten, right?
Thinking of them, it's just like top of mind, right? So I think I mentioned a couple, right? Like I'll go back to like looking at like a multi-platform, different genres, but
please,
you've got DeFi Kingdom. They're still humming along on their subnet. They've introduced like duels, a bunch of features that are come out. Like they're great.
Yeah.
Pulsar, who I know well, like it's an RTS, and I think they're like giving away a ton of tokens in this like first round.
The game is playable, bro. Like the game is available.
They were at Avalanche. I'm sorry, at GDC. A ton of people were really intrigued. Rainy is a really cool one. They're like a card game built by some really strong devs that we've been spending a lot of time with, and I think they just announced that they're going to be part of that first batch of crypto games that are going to be in Epic Game Store. So that's really cool. Wow. I mentioned Shrapnel, of course. Like that's really exciting. Fableborn is another one. Like they're a mobile studio that we've been talking to for a long time. They're building kind of like a Archer Clash of Clans, like a new take on that, and we really like that team as well. So that's a couple. Paradise Tycoon is another like kind of like island fun, cute simulator that I've spent a lot of time with. The music is awesome, so check that out. Nice. And then that's a couple.
What genre do you think has not been explored properly in Web3? Do you have an idea? Because at this point, first-person shooters, racing games, play-to-earn games, strategy games, card games, those we've seen. But is there a genre that you think people should pay attention to because it's completely missing? Is there any alpha that we can extract here from the head of GameFi for the builders out there?
I think that when people tend to think about gaming, they think about actual games you'll play, right? Like Pokemon, Counter-Strike, Valorant, etc. Sure. I think if you think about like we announced a deal recently with TSM. It was a huge deal. So TSM is one of the world's largest esports organizations. But the most interesting part is they've got this coaching app called Blitz, right? It's got like 10 million MAUs. They basically, it runs in the background on your PC, but it gives you insights when you're playing like League, Counter-Strike, Valorant, Apex Legends, etc. They're going to be bringing that to Web3 on a subnet, right? And like the idea is that they would white label core and offer like the wallet experience to folks, and you'd be able to enter competitions and in the future be able to directly purchase in-game items in games. Like, to me, that's gaming, right? But it's not gaming in the sense that a lot of people think about, right? So I think that area is pretty like untapped in terms of the potential. Like, you know, like when you really sit there and you ask like, what can blockchain make better and more seamless? I think that's something there that is still like, there's a lot of space to explore. You know, I think when it comes to things like wagering, things like the gamification of a lot of things, I think could be really interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. Makes sense. I guess, you know, looking at this from the perspective of Web2 gamers, what are the things that they need to try some of these games? Because I've actually had a lot of conversations with gamers who say, I hate crypto. Yeah. And somehow that became a culture of its own. I think, you know, UX, etc., is part of it. But what is the crucial things that, you know, obviously TSM partnership is massive, but what else? What are the types of things that need to be changed before we can truly bring in large Web2 masses?
I mean, I think there's like a few components probably. Like one of them is the UX, right? You're not going to get somebody to download MetaMask and figure out how to set up like their RPC and get money in there. Yeah. So like then it leads you to like a custodial wallet experience, like fiat on ramps and all that kind of stuff, and there's questions around like KYC and all that kind of stuff. So I think figuring that out and like seeing that actually implemented and just like similar to the App Store where you download a game and you jump in and then you can figure out like the wallet and like the crypto stuff later. I think that's one piece. And I think we're getting there and we're there. I've seen experiences that a lot of games have built, but like, again, at scale. I think like the second one is you just need to get players in the door, right? Like, if there is a game that all of your friends are playing and yes, the items are on the blockchain, like, do you really care? Like, you'd rather go play with your game or your friends, sorry, right? Yeah. I think free to play was very similar in that people were like, oh, this is scammy. Like, I'm not sure about this. Like, you know, you're trying to monetize me on the back end, like things like that. Like, so it does take some getting adjusted to. And then, yeah, I think the last one is like, I was having an interesting conversation yesterday with an investor and, you know, he had a good point, which is like, he doesn't know if free to play is going to be like the be all end all, right? For Web3, because every game is trending towards that in Web2 as well. So like, what is the carrot that gets somebody from Web2 into a Web3 game when they're perfectly happy playing what they're playing, right? So is it a free skin? Is it some tokens? Is it something else? Like, I don't have an answer to that, but that's an interesting question to ask as well.
Well, it kind of speaks to something you said a few minutes ago when you were saying that, you know, at GDC, I mean, you're talking to devs that have kind of turned around a little bit in terms of asking you how this all works instead of asking you how they're being scammed, how you're scamming them, right? And I think the same transition is kind of going to take place with Web2 gamers too. It's just going to take a little bit of time. I mean, when they see the utility, I think for the longest time, there was just this sentiment out there in the gaming world, which I know because I'm a part of it. If you would see anything about crypto, it would be automatic scam, NFTs. It's a scam. It's a scam. We're not touching it. We're going to leave the most downvotes in Reddit history on this post, whatever. You know what I mean? And I think as more people get accustomed and learn, it's basically an education thing. And I think the same thing is happening with the devs that are approaching you at GDC saying like, okay, well, how does this all work? Instead of saying, how are you scamming me? You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of like the key component there. It's just going to take time and exactly what you said. You know what I mean? So it's the why, right?
The one question that I've heard from teams that are building games, right? I think the challenge, especially now, is, again, the market isn't where it was at the end of 2021. Right. And a lot of people raise money, but even let's say you're a very successful project, successful by current terms, even then the money you end up raising is not gonna be comparable to a truly AAA produced by EA type of game, right? Like, what are the key things that you think these smaller teams need to focus to be able to compete with these monster budgets that the publishers can throw at stuff? Like, what are the key things from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it starts with having kind of the right team in place and like the expertise across the board, right? Because I think early on we saw a lot of teams that were either like very crypto natives and or like they were just game developers, right? And like you're starting to see the value of a well-rounded team, because it's hard to like figure out how much do I need to spend on user acquisition if I don't have like a marketing team, right? Or like, okay, like how much is it going to cost to use this service or build on top of this chain or integrate this smart contract if you don't like necessarily have that expertise in house. So there's an element of that, of like having the right people on board to like accurately assess and be able to execute against that. I think that also like early on in that bull market, a lot of teams, saw this like up only trajectory. So they raised the minimum amount possible to get to like an NFT sale way before the game launches. And then there's an IDO, and then we can always raise more money if we want to, right? So it was a very like frothy environment. And I think a lot of teams didn't necessarily weren't very real about what it would take to get to market. But also I think there's the element of I would say really think about what your key differentiator is and like what the selling point is. Going back to okay, if it's just a carbon copy of a Web 2 game, it's going to be really hard again to lift and shift some of these people. Like how are you thinking about the narrative? How are you thinking about how you fit into the ecosystem? How are you thinking about incentivizing users? So those are all things that our team helps our games with, and there isn't again a silver bullet, because every team and every game is very different.
Absolutely. I think maybe the most practical thing to say, and I fully agree with everything you said, the most important one is make your budget and double it and plan at least for 2x that you end up having to expend, right? Because you don't know where the market is going to be in 2 years' time. And you definitely want to have enough runway, enough on your roadmap, and enough flexibility to change directions if conditions change, right? One of the things that I haven't seen a lot from many projects is pivoting. Obviously, for a game, pivoting is quite difficult, but it can still be done, especially if the shift is happening, right? Like play to earn was massive. Will it ever come back? I have no idea. Do you think it will come back, play to earn models? Or do you think it's sort of?
I feel like the market has gone. I mean, I think there will always be some play to earn esque games, right? There's always going to be something new, like how move to earn came in, and then play to own. There's always some really, there's always some marketing term for that stuff. I don't think it'll go away, especially because those types of games and projects are easier to implement. And when the bull market resumes, I guarantee you will see a lot of them. But I do think a lot of that focus and narrative is going to be on how do you sustainably build a game that can stand the test of time in terms of CSGO has been around for what, 10, 15 plus years,
long time.
League of Legends, games like that. How do you get there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think AI can really speed up this cycle? Like ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, massive productivity improvements, right? Like a good developer can operate at the strength of 10 decent developers with the use of these tools. Do you think that gives a big edge to smaller teams versus larger companies, which will typically be slower in adopting these types of tools?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to give a disclaimer that I'm not an expert on kind of the AI side. And funny enough, I was just asking some folks smarter than me today about hey, what are some good reads or podcasts to listen to, and just to get smarter. And the lens is yes, from everything I hear and everything I see, there are so many ways to simplify how people traditionally have worked, right? Of even having ChatGPT code certain functions that they would have to have an intern or a entry level programmer do, or like
it's
art
scary,
and
dude.
stuff like that, right? So,
Crazy.
I think a lot of the ways that we think about doing things are going to be disrupted. But I think what's more interesting is probably like, what are some of the implications for gaming, right? So a lot of these Web3 games, for example, they don't like have a ton of users on day one. Well, can you have much smarter AI, right, to help like kind of seed the initial user base? Or I know there's some pretty cool stuff going on around like helping combat like player toxicity and things like that. Like if you don't need an actual person to listen to all the audio. You just have AI like listen for certain things. Like I think it makes it a much better gaming experience for everyone.
Anti-cheat, man. Anti-cheat.
Yeah, I think it's
Warzone.
Surface here. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many applications, not just on the dev side, but also on the scaling side, right? Have AI join every game as a mod admin, and as long as you can reach 99 percentile accuracy, massive value add. No team needed, actual full coverage of your platform and game. I mean, again, I'm sort of a ex-gamer. Like you, I don't get much time to play. I only play Diablo maybe an hour or two.
I'm a current gamer. I have no life, so I'm your target.
Yeah, well, wait till you have a bunch of newborns, man. But anyways, very, very interesting. I feel like the new tooling around AI, based on all the things we see on Twitter, based on some couple small sampling of what it's capable of, is a massive weapon for the smaller teams that cannot raise or cannot spend $200 million on their gaming overall budget, right? Last question from me. Which publisher do you think is closest to Web3 in your opinion?
You're talking like a Web 2 publisher?
Yeah, Web 2 publisher that you think is nimble enough and innovative enough that eventually will adopt some blockchain as a part of one of the bigger franchises? Or do you think that's not going to happen anytime soon?
I mean, like, this is probably not fully answering your question, because like there are a lot of publishers that have already like announced stuff, or we've talked to them and we know that they're kind of exploring the space. I'll name two. I think one of them is Gree, right? They're like a legendary traditional like Japanese developer who has like really embraced crypto. So we announced a deal with them. Like to kick off the deal, they're actually running like validators, and then they're also exploring like building a Web3 game and looking at subnets. And we are very close to that team, and it's been a really great relationship so far. And I think you tend to see like for whatever reason, a lot more of the Asian, like larger publishers, like really embrace and explore like the potential of blockchain. Another one is probably Nexon. Like unfortunately, they aren't built on Avalanche, but they announced at GDC that they are, they're building MapleStory as a blockchain game. And some of the ways they're thinking about, Web3 and player ownership and, presented in a way that's digestible to normies are I think really interesting. And I think it is a bold experiment, but if successful, I could see a lot of other publishers kind of following that trend.
You're giving me hope for Web3 Elden Ring right now. You know what I mean? So
you never know.
You never know. Exactly. Well, I got a couple questions before you go. And chat, remember, if you do have any questions for Ed, drop them in the chat. But I just got a couple quick ones for you, man. First of all, would you ever come back to the show and talk to us about gaming again? I mean, we'd love to have you come back and talk about all the new developments from Avalabs and whatever's going on in the Web3 gaming space. You're obviously an authority, so we'd love to have you come back.
Yes, would love to.
All right. That's what I was looking for. And second question, I play some music to take us out and to start the show every week. So I got to get a request from you. Sorry to put you on the spot. Luigi wanted some 50 Cent. We're keeping the Avalabs train going here. I think Lydia wanted Taylor Swift. John Woo requested Temple of the Dog. I mean, I got them all, man. I got crates and crates of music. So if you got a request, I'm happy to oblige. Give it a second. I'll let you think about it.
I need to think.
Yeah, think about it. Think about it. And I'll repeat while you think about that. I'll tell the chat guys.
Okay.
We are going to spin the wheel of PFPs towards the end of the show here. If you weren't here to hear the keyword, it is hum, H-U-M. We're celebrating our Hummingbot integration. All right. We're going to spin the wheel of PFPs. somebody's going to walk away a winner. Last week it was Mr. Kit to you. Congrats to Mr. Kit. And the keyword is hum. So if you want to get in on that, type it in the chat. It looks like there's contraband. I see you. All right. And it looks like, oh, 0x Ninjas is in the house. What's up, Ninjas? And okay. So we'll go with that. Ed, what do you got? Did I put you on the spot too much?
Let's go with Drake.
Ooh.
Hotline Bling.
Ooh. Hotline Bling? Yes.
Do it.
I know when
Let's
that Hotline
go.
Bling. Yeah, dude, that's awesome. That's like that. I used to play that when I was in my former life as a club and event DJ. That used to be my closer. I would play Hotline Bling as a closer. So
I think I just saw like that GIF of his like music video
Yes.
in the chat somewhere, and I was like, you know what? Let's do it.
I actually use that in my other Twitch channel. So that's funny that you say that. But yes, we will do some Hotline Bling for you. I got you. And it looks like the chat is typing the keyword. So Ed, I just want to thank you for coming through the show, man, and talking to us about Avalabs and everything that's going on in Web3 gaming. It's been awesome to bend your ear about this stuff and hear about everything that's going on, and especially at GDC. I mean, that looks so amazing. So Ed Chang, thank you so much for being on the show.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me, guys.
Keep doing God's work, my friends. We'll see you next time.
Yes, sir.
Take it easy.
Take care.
Peace.
Thanks again.